of space and time, which are regarded by Bergson only as intellectual views of movement. By intellectual views meaning objectification or abstraction. By intellectual movement we mean here, I think in part anyway, by intellectual what was the word he used? By intellectual view of motion or movement. I think in part that intellectual means objectification, which is making something into object which it is not. So motion is a lived reality. So only true motion can be only understood as from within rather than from without objectifying it. I think that's sort of the idea behind this intellectual view and its rejection. So intellectual, so reality, the paradox of Zeno is due to a wrong apprehension of space and time, which are regarded by Bergson only as intellectual views of movement or motion. It is not possible to develop here the argument of Bergson without a fuller treatment of the metaphysical concept of life on which the whole argument is based. According to the editor of this book, Allama Iqbal's lectures, Bergson's criticism of Zeno's argument is developed in Creative Evolution, page 250 to 30, 325 to 30, and also in earlier work, Time and Free Will, on page 113 to 15. So he mentions Bergson, but move on to Bertrand Russell. Okay. And that is continuous with his reference to Whitehead, who was, although Whitehead's philosophy is closer to Bergson's philosophy than to Russell's. But in this chapter, he's talking a lot about physics and Einstein and all those things, and quantum physics, etc. And before that, he talked about Locke's conception of substance, etc., which we looked at. So I think that is continuous with that. But if I'm not misremembering it, he did refer a bit more to Bergson in chapter 1, and we might have looked at it. And probably he will come back to Bergson, because Bergson is very important for him. Russell, more than Russell. Obviously, Russell is not important to Allama Iqbal. He's just using Russell here for Cantor's assumed or presumed solution of Zeno's paradox. Yeah, but Bergson. But before moving on to Russell, I'll just give just a brief summary of what Bergson, at least one view of, one interpretation of, one understanding of Bergson's view on Zeno's paradox, because that's the topic here. And probably I'll refer briefly to Whitehead's solution as well, because solution or understanding of Zeno's paradox, because in this regard, in this regard, Bergson and Whitehead are quite close to each other, but they both, at least in certain aspects, they both have a dynamic view of universe. They are both in the becoming camp of philosophy as compared to being camp. Okay, so let's. Basically, for Whitehead, in very brief, and maybe we'll look at it with in a bit more detail in another session. Whitehead's and Bergson both, I think they agreed on a critique of a mathematical or a spatial conception of time, and that is clear from, for example, Whitehead's critique of Russell's conception of time in, for example, is Russell's philosophy of mathematics. But where Whitehead and Bergson differ is on how to positively conceptualize or arrive at a notion of continuity, which form the core of the temporality as a process and its relation to becoming. Anyway, in short, Zeno's paradoxes provide to Whitehead a backdrop through which he developed his own notion of becoming of what he called becoming of continuity. On the other hand, so in a way, Whitehead takes Zeno's paradoxes seriously. On the other hand, for Bergson, Zeno's paradoxes are a false problem, in the sense that they essentially rely on a false conception of time, intellectual conception of movement, which we refer to, or intellectual view of movement, or more precisely, what Bergson called specialized conception of time. So Zeno's paradoxes appear to be paradoxes because they rely on a conception of time which fashions or understand time on the image of space, and that sort of covers over the continuity of becoming, which can only be understood, I guess, only from within, from a phenomenological or sort of subjective or subjective conception from within. So that's just a pointer towards the difference between, or at least the difference is that although Whitehead and Bergson both agree on their critique of a specialized conception of time, they arrive at it differently, in the sense that Whitehead considered Zeno's paradoxes as a useful backdrop. On the other hand, Bergson treats it as a false problem. So basically, Bergson doesn't try to solve the problem, he tried to dissolve it in a more Wittgensteinian way. Okay, let's go back. So now he said that he's not going to talk about Bergson, because in order to talk about his critique, you need to develop his conception of life, which will take too much time, even though he does discuss, he gives like 2 pages to Russell, which seems a bit overblown. But anyway, we'll look at Bertrand Russell's argument proceed on Cantor's theory of mathematical continuity. So we'll look at it next time, inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa